Welcome to Spenny and the Nets, the number one Brooklyn Nets podcast available. I am your host, Spen Harris, and I am joined by my co-host and brother, Nicholas.
When you say the number one Brooklyn Nets podcast available, are you implying that there are better podcasts? They're just not available right now.
That very well might be the case, but
I'm telling you guys, there are some phenomenal podcasts out there, but they're just not available. So you should probably listen to this one.
This is the one to listen to. Okay. You got me, you got Nicholas, and we're going to tell you everything you need to know about the Brooklyn Nets. And let's start, Nick, with the 9-13 record. So the title of this episode is The Nets Tank is Back On. Episode 207. Nets have been winning a little bit to start the year. Fans were worried. What's going to happen? We're going to win too much. We're maybe going to accidentally make the play-in playoff game. And I said, guys, hold the phone. There's a lot of basketball left. This team is not built to win enough to get to the playoffs and not be in the lottery. So what has happened? The Nets are 1-4 in their last 5. I'm sorry, 1-3 in their last 5 games. They're currently 11th
in their last 4 games.
Right. Yeah. 1-3 in their last 4 games. They're currently 11th in the East. The only teams with a worse record than the Brooklyn Nets are the Charlotte Hornets and Toronto Raptors with 6 wins. Philly has 4 wins and Washington has 2 wins. And that's just in the East. In the West, Portland has 8 wins and Utah and New Orleans have 4 wins apiece. So we are getting to that bottom tier of the NBA. Yes, we've been playing hard. Yes, we've been competing, but that hasn't really been the case the last 3 games. We're going to get into it in a little bit, game by game. We're going to break down the last 4 games for you. But Nick, what do you think of this current 9-13 Brooklyn Nets squad?
I just want to say, before the season started, the over-under wins for the Nets season as a whole was 19.5. And I told people to hammer that. And they called me crazy. You have to win 20 games out of 82 games, 20-52 record, and you hit that bet. 20-62. Wow, I'm getting your terrible math bug. And it's literally halfway there. 9-13. They have to win 11 games of their next 60. That's a no-brainer. So, yes, past 4 games, they've lost 3. Not looking fantastic, but overall, holistically, 9-13. This team was projected to be at this point 3-18. I consider this already a pleasant surprise Brooklyn Nets team. Now, if you're hoping for more of a tank, then they're tanking the tank, and the tank has not looked good in the first few weeks of the season. But if you're speaking in terms of player development and potential of some of these young guys, it's already been a successful season a quarter of the way in, just in terms of skill and guys on the team who could potentially be on a winning Brooklyn Nets organization at some point.
Yeah, that's a good point. And I think what you're seeing early on is we found our coach. Jordi Fernandez, to me, is the best coach in New York. That is no disrespect to Tom Thibodeau. He's been doing this a long time. But what Jordi Fernandez has done, the games that he has won and even been competitive in with this group of guys, I'm not sure there are many coaches in the NBA that can pull off what he has pulled off so far. Having said that, great coaching can only get you so far in this league. Unfortunately, you need talent. You need athleticism. You need guys who have been in this league for a while to be successful. And the Nets don't have a lot of that. Let's call it what it is. They have a lot of guys that are really vying to be on an NBA roster, right? Almost everyone on this team is auditioning for their next contract, whether it's Dennis Schroeder, whether it's, these young guys like Noah Clowney, Jalen Wilson, whether it's Trendon Watford, who's been in the league for a few years, but hasn't really found a home, whether it's Zaire Williams, who's on his second life with the Brooklyn Nets because it didn't work out in Memphis. So you have a lot of guys that are just trying to find a home in the NBA. And I think Brooklyn's a great place for them to do that. But I don't think anyone expects this Nets team to be a top 8 team when all is said and done in the East, let alone a top 10 team.
Yes, but you're saying things that I thought were obvious from the get-go. Like that was what the expectation was, right? So we're talking about pleasant surprises. Some players have stood out, and now you're saying Jordy Fernandez. Are you saying this was expected, or are you saying looking forward to the future, you think we found our guy to almost create like a dynasty?
Well, the latter, yes. Looking to the future, we figured it out with Jordy Fernandez. And the one thing I do want to say is I don't think this was expected. The fact that our record against the West, I think it's something ridiculous, like 5 or 6-1. We've beaten the Grizzlies twice. We've beaten the Pelicans. We've beaten the Kings, the Warriors, and the Suns. So that's 6 wins. The only team that has beat us in the West, let's see, there's one loss here, and that was the Denver Nuggets, and we lost to them in overtime. So that's unexpected, right? The fact that we've racked up wins against Sacramento, Golden State, and Phoenix and Memphis, who are teams all vying to get into the Western Conference playoffs and be competitive. The thing I think that we figured out, Nick, that might not be so obvious is, yeah, I mean, we're still in a rebuild. We still have to figure out which players are going to be the future of this team.
It's still not Ben Simmons.
It's still probably not Ben Simmons, but we figured out our culture. We figured out our identity with Jordy Fernandez, and that's where it's going to start. And that's how you build. You have to have a starting block. And player-wise, some might say Cam Thomas. I'm not sure. He's the guy to build around. Yes, he's still young, but you know, I unfortunately I don't know if he can be the best player on a championship level team. Maybe the third, maybe the fourth best player. But the number one, I don't think so. But we figured out our coach of the future. We figured out the identity of this team moving forward. And we'll get into it. But the games we've lost recently, I don't care how good of a coach Jordy Fernandez is. He's not going to win every single game, undermanned, lacking the talent the opponent has, and just winning off of sheer effort and execution.
No, but he's gotten pretty damn close a few times.
He has. So I want to get into recent headlines. Number one, Cam Johnson. Cam Johnson, to me, has been the biggest surprise of this season early on for the Nets. I did a complete 180 on Cam Johnson. Last season, every time he stepped on the court, I found myself getting frustrated. First of all, he dealt with injuries last year, so I got to give him the benefit of the doubt. But when he was on the court, he was usually the 4th or 5th best net on the court. Couldn't really hit the three, couldn't score the basketball consistently. Defensively, he wasn't, standing out. He wasn't playing great defense. And I was ready to move on from him this offseason. We trade Mikal Bridges. Cam Johnson gets a nice little contract. And all of a sudden I'm like, okay, we're going to pay him. That means we're really going to suck. But he has been really, really good this year. And he's played phenomenal basketball. And to me, he has become the most valuable trade asset that the Nets have. And I just want to pull up his stats from this year so the listeners understand what he's currently doing. So last season, he averaged 13.4 points per game. This season, he is averaging...
And tell me his field goal percentage too.
Yeah. So last season, it was 13.4 points per game on 45% from the field, 39% from three. This year, he's 18.1 points per game. So we're already seeing a 5 points per game increase. He's shooting 49% from the field, and he's shooting 42% from three. So
that's
some really
that's
nice
most improved player caliber stats.
I mean, and he's playing like it, Nick, and the eye test matches that, right? You see him, he's taking these long distance Steph Curry threes without hesitation and draining them. And if a guy gets up on him on the 3-point line, he's making the right basketball decision, dribbling past the guy, getting to the hole, and he's either getting fouled, he's making tough layups, or he's kicking it out. I have been extremely impressed with Cam Johnson. Now, the recent headline is, Cam Johnson had a quote about his future and obviously being mentioned in trade rumors. Cam Johnson said, "I want to be here and get this thing really turned around and back to winning basketball. I think we have the group to do it. I think we have the assets and pieces to do it. Whatever they decide, no hard feelings." So Cam Johnson knows he's on the block. But what he's telling Nets fans and what he's telling the media is, hey, I want to be here. I want to grow with this team. Now he's 28 years old. He turns 29 in March. But Nick, do you have any hesitation about trading him during what's basically been a career year for him?
I do. And I think I can fully attribute it to the confidence that he's playing with. And whether that's Jordy Fernandez, whether that's getting rid of Mikal Bridges and him kind of becoming that guy and stepping into those shoes, he's a guy right now with in crunch time. You want the ball in his hands. And last season, you could definitively say that was not true. There were times at the end where Mikal Bridges, and notoriously Mikal Bridges all season last year pissed me off because he never touched the ball in the fourth quarter. He would score like 30 in the first three, and then he'd go MIA. Then Cam Johnson would come in and take those shots, and he'd be bricking threes at the buzzer to lose the game or to not win the game, But I now do have those reservations because watching him play with these younger guys, they're building this chemistry. Claxton, Clowney, everyone's kind of working together. He's hitting Schroeder. Schroeder's hitting him for open threes. They're kind of going back and forth, a little Splash Brothers-esque on a much smaller scale, volume-wise too. But yeah, it's tough to almost build someone up to a point where they have more trade value, where you want to keep them and then still trade them anyway. So there's other people, and I die on this hill. I still would rather get rid of Cam Thomas than Cam Johnson because I think you can get more for Cam Thomas. And I still think Cam Thomas, as much as I love his scoring ability, I don't know what he's really bringing. Now, I see your face. Maybe you're getting similar things for both. But to answer your question, yes, I like Cam Johnson. This is a different side of him I have never seen before as a fifth or sixth man on the Suns or as a third or fourth man on the Nets. Now being in a 1 or 2 position, he's really stepping up his game.
I love that. That's your take. I love it because I couldn't disagree with you more. Cam Johnson's trade value is the highest it's ever going to be. When I said he's having a career year, there has not been a year when he played with Phoenix. His best year, it was with Brooklyn in 2022, 2023 when he I guess he got traded. It's weird the way they have it stacked up, but he was averaging close to 17 points per game. That was when we had the playoff series with Philly and Cam Johnson was our best player. His trade value hasn't been this high since, right after that series. There are teams in the West, the Golden State Warriors, the Los Angeles Clippers, the Los Angeles Lakers, the Memphis Grizzlies, that all have first-round picks, and they have young pieces that probably aren't going to see the court that I would absolutely love to have dealt to Brooklyn, and we can deal Cam Johnson. From what I've been hearing, Dorian Finney-Smith, Dennis Schroeder, despite these guys having pretty good seasons, Schroeder much better than DFS, they're not getting back first-round talent. They're just not. I think Dorian Finney-Smith might go for 2 2s. Dennis Schroeder can go for maybe two second-rounders. And a player, but Cam Johnson's value as a trade asset has never been higher. And there are so many teams in the West that can use him. So as great as he's been this year, as fun as it's been to watch him in a Nets uniform, especially if you want to be a lottery team, you want these guys in the top 5 or top 6 in the NBA draft next season, Cam Johnson has to go. And he has to go before the new year.
Well, then I guess really what I'm being is falsely optimistic about building a team with a lot of the pieces we have now. What you're saying is if we're going to keep approaching this full rebuild, you're right. We're going to get more picks for him. If that is our goal, then that is the right move. Me, again, loving building a team from within, love developing young players. I would almost want to continue seeing these young guys develop around Cam Johnson, but then what I end up getting trapped in is we would still need a superstar to come over and play along Cam Johnson. Cam's not going to be the guy. Cam Thomas is not going to be the guy. So I guess looking from an organizational perspective from the future, you are right. That is the logical decision to make, to trade him off, get more picks, keep building. From my perspective, this team is 9-13. They could still have a chance to make that 9th, 8th, even 7th seed in the playoffs if they stay healthy and they continue playing at the caliber they've been playing at. With that said, with this current squad, no matter how good they play, no matter how much Cam Johnson shoots 20% and 50% from the field and 42% from 3, they're still not going to be a top 5 team in the East. So I understand from a practical standpoint, that makes the most sense. I just would like to see him continue growing and be a factor for this organization.
So a few comments on what you just said. Number one, you said if they can stay healthy. They have not been healthy.
Yeah,
Cam Johnson,
yes. I meant
Cam
if they
Johnson
were healthy.
is dealing with 2 ankle injuries on both of his ankles. Cam Thomas is hurt. This team is, you said 7th seed. That's a stretch. I think at the very best, they're a 10th seed. At the very best right now. It's just the way it is. The second thing, in terms of Cam Thomas versus Cam Johnson, which one do you move off of? Cam Johnson is more of a plug and play with really any team because he doesn't need the ball in his hands to be effective, right? He could be a catch and shoot 3-point shot type of guy. He could be a 3-and-D type of player.
He's whereas Cam Thomas,
yes, right. Cam Thomas was like, Cam Thomas has to have the ball in his hands to be effective. He's not a catch and shoot guy. His defense isn't good enough for him to be in the game and not be touching the ball. At least Cam Johnson can kind of get by with his length and versatility on defense. So for me, Cam Thomas still 23 years old. You can still figure it out with him, with whoever you draft next year. Maybe that's a 1-2 punch you want to go into the 2024-2025 season with. I'm sorry, the 2025-2026 season with. But I don't believe that Cam Johnson will be involved in the future of the Brooklyn Nets. Now, having said all this, I do have a few trade scenarios I'd like to run by you. You ready?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Tell me which trade I have 4 that you'd like to do the most. The Warriors, we get a first and Jonathan Kuminga for Cam Johnson. The Los Angeles Clippers, we get a first and either Bones Highland or Terrence Mann for Cam Johnson. The Lakers, we get a first and either Max Christie or is it Jordan Vanderbilt for Cam Johnson? Jared Vanderbilt. And then the Grizzlies at the 4th trade scenario, we get a first and either Scottie Pippen Jr. or G.G. Jackson for Cam Johnson.
I'm going with Kuminga and the Warriors.
And I think that he'd fit perfectly there. Don't you think Cam Johnson could be a great addition to Curry, Hield, and Draymond?
Why do we want that?
Well, we don't really care who wins in the West. I mean, listen, there are also Eastern Conference teams like the Magic, like the Pacers, who are trying to compete with the Celtics, the Cavs, and the Knicks, who we can absolutely deal him to, too.
Yeah, my only question with Cam Johnson going to the Warriors, and I agree, he almost has like a Klay Thompson vibe on a much smaller scale, but they kind of have that with Buddy Hield right now. Buddy Hield is Curry's new splash bro, and Buddy Hield can make him rain. So I don't really know if Kuminga solves a need on a Warriors team that could use more bigs as opposed to getting another 2 or 3. And Cam does lean 3 a lot of the time, but I still don't think that's a necessity that they need opposed to Kuminga. But I would be happier with that situation over the other 4 that you gave me.
Buddy Hield is
Dalton Connect.
Dalton, yeah, the Lakers aren't giving him up. Buddy Hield has regressed to the mean, by the way. So his career average is 15.5 points per game. This season, he's averaging 15.3 points per game. His last 10 games, he's only averaging 12 points per game and shooting 38.6% from the field. So he has been a little bit worse than his hot start. I agree. Out of those 4 trades, I'd probably say Warriors 1, Grizzlies 2, Clippers 3, Lakers 4 in that order. All right. Moving on, I just saw this and I wanted to bring it up, but Kevin O'Connor, who covers the NBA, he has a show, the Kevin O'Connor Show. He's been covering the NBA since 2013. He brought up an interesting possibility about Zion Williamson, and he said he wanted to come to New York. Maybe Brooklyn can be the Zion Williamson team. Now, his co-host Dan Titus responded, Brooklyn seems like a natural fit. I just don't know if they want to invest in a guy that's injured after dealing with Ben Simmons. Nick, what do you think about the possibility of Zion Williamson playing for the Brooklyn Nets?
I can't help but agree with the latter opinion of one of the most injury-prone players in the NBA of the last 20 years. You know, you got Zion, you got Ben. You got Klay Thompson in there missing 2 years, but honestly, outside of that, he was okay, but he never came back the same. I love Zion Williamson when he's playing well. He would add something to this team that we desperately need, and maybe he in his prime and Cam Thomas in his prime over the next few years are a duo that could be super effective. But I really want to stray away from adding another player to the roster that half the time is unhealthy, right? If you're telling me he's missing 10 to 15 games a year, I could live with that. But look at a guy like Kawhi Leonard. Like the Clippers honestly don't look bad this season. They've had some great games. They're kind of like top middle of the pack in the West. But having a player like Kawhi, a player like Ben, and Ben will never be Kawhi Leonard, but you just half the time don't even know if he's playing. And then the playoffs come and he has a third injury you didn't even know about. So as much as, yes, if you said to me right now we can get Zion for a couple players we have, I would take that in a heartbeat. I'm not denying that trade, but I would want to know the other options of higher caliber players along with Zion, because there's probably a guy we can get who would be just as impactful on this team with a track record that is, a microcosm of what Zion Williamson's is in terms of injuries.
Yeah, I think that's pretty well
I'd rather have
said.
Brandon Ingram.
I want the Nets to stand pat on these kinds of players, right? Because if Zion Williamson comes to the Brooklyn Nets, all of a sudden it's his team. Now you have to work around his schedule. Now you have to play to his personality, and the culture changes a bit. And the one thing I like about this current regime is the owner and the GM don't answer to the players, right? There's a working relationship between the players and the coach, but it's Sean Marks' show right now. It's Jordy Fernandez's show. And when you bring in a guy like Zion Williamson, who's a proven vet in this league, who's an all-star, who becomes your franchise player, it can change the dynamic of the overall structure between the coach, between the front office, between the players. And we've seen it happen with KD and Kyrie and James Harden. We saw what happened, years ago with Paul Pierce and KG when they came in here, and just the friction that was created between the expectations and the personalities and the head coach at that time. It was Jason Kidd. And, this is one of those scenarios where the Nets need to stand pat. They need to stick with their vision of rebuilding, and Zion Williamson does not fit in that vision.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that.
All right. Last thing before we get to the last 4 games, update on lottery picks. So I thought this was interesting. After a Jazz fan hinted that Rutgers star Dylan Harper would not come to Utah if they drafted him, Dylan Harper's dad, former NBA champion Ron Harper, tweeted, "Correct. A trade would happen." Ron Harper would later go on to tweet, "Stop, believe what I said about my son playing in Utah. If me and a friend have a tweet about what team wants him, it's all about fun. I don't control my son or an NBA team's draft board. LOL. I see pictures of a few teams that I wouldn't want him on, but it's not my career." So he said he wouldn't play for Utah, but then he's kind of saying, well, I'm just the loudmouth dad. It's not really up to me. It's up to my son. I'm just futzing around on Twitter. However, this bodes very well for the Nets, right?
I have to say, I find that so spoiled, and goddamn, man, like you get drafted by a team that believes in you, and even a worse team that even wants to build an organization around you. Take that with pride and go in there with the mindset, if the team's not that great right now, then make them better. I just find that to be so pathetic, man. Like, I'm not playing here because A, they're not good, or I don't like their city. Like, you should be lucky you're playing anywhere. And that's not to take away from players working hard. I know these college athletes have earned a spot on an NBA team if they're good enough and skilled enough. But where's the respect and loyalty for a team that drafts you and believes in you? That just bothers me. That rubs me the wrong way.
You know who's famous for doing that?
Eli Manning.
And in the NBA?
LeBron's son?
What? No, Kobe Bryant.
No, it was also
well, yeah, it was Bronny James, but that was different because he wasn't a top 10 pick. Kobe Bryant could have been a New Jersey Net, but his father said he will not play for the Nets. He won't play for these teams. And the Nets, you know who they drafted? They drafted Kerry Kittles instead.
Legend.
So it's interesting. It bodes well for the Nets, because if Utah has the first pick and the Nets have the second or the third pick, and Dylan Harper or Cooper Flagg or Ace Bailey, one of these guys don't want to play in Utah, I mean, Brooklyn's going to be the benefactor of that. Guys want to play in Brooklyn. And now we have a coach that they probably want to play for. So just thought it was interesting. Wanted to bring it up. But I think what I take away from this is young players in college. Brooklyn is an attractive destination for Dylan Harper, for Ace Bailey, for Cooper Flagg, for VJ Edgecombe, for Igor Demin, the player from BYU.
His last name is Edgecombe?
Edgecombe, yeah. VJ Edgecombe. Yeah.
Oh, Combe, okay.
Combe, yeah. Sorry. All right. Final bit of news. I forgot this one. I thought this was a fun little nugget. Goodbye, Paul Millsap. Former Net is retiring from the NBA. Long career. Nick, could you name all 5 teams that Paul Millsap played with in his career?
Utah Jazz.
Okay.
Atlanta Hawks.
Okay.
Brooklyn Nets.
Okay. There's 2 left.
Can you tell me if they're East or West?
One is a East Coast. One is a West Coast.
Oh man. Spurs?
No.
Tell me Nuggets.
Yes, that's one. And what's the East Coast thing?
One more in the East. Oh geez, not Celtics, not Bucks, not Knicks.
And this was his last season. He only played about 9 games for this team.
I don't know. Pistons?
No, it's the Sixers.
I wouldn't have gotten that. I got 4 out of 5 though. That's pretty good.
You did. He played 16 years in the NBA, 7 years for the Jazz, 4 years for the Hawks, 4 years for the Nuggets, 1 year for Brooklyn, and 1 year for Philly. So shout out to Paul Millsap. Really nice career. I think his best years were in Atlanta when he was on those playoff teams. I just want to see statistically if that is accurate. Yeah.
Like
He averaged close to – he was a defensive player of the year candidate in 2015, 2016.
Also just seemed like a genuinely good team player and a veteran leader on the court. I really respected the game and was respected by the players around him. So RIP.
Well, he's not dead. He's just retired. So RIR, rest and retirement.
Sounds good.
All right. Last 15 minutes, we're going to go over these last 4 games for the Brooklyn Nets. We are going to start with the game on Monday night. It was a loss to Chicago, 128-102. I had a feeling the Nets were going to lose this game going in. No Cam Johnson, no Cam Thomas. So it was going to have to be a game in which Dennis Schroeder played extremely well. Guys like Tyrese Martin, Jalen Wilson, Nick Claxton, these guys were going to have to step up. Trendon Watford. And it wasn't the case, right? You can only do the next man up mentality so many times. And I think in this one, it caught up to the Nets, not to mention everyone on Chicago played well. Like Nikola Vucevic dominated the Nets. He led the way with 21 points, 10 rebounds. He was 8 of 11 from the field. Nick Claxton just could not defend him. You had Buzelis, Matis Buzelis, the rookie coming out off the bench. He put up 20 points in 22 minutes.
And he averages 5 points a game, that guy.
He doesn't get a lot of time, but I watched him yesterday, Nick, and he looks like a legitimate potential star to me in the NBA. Just a really nice player, could hit the three. Yeah, really nice player. Josh Giddey had his first triple-double with the Bulls, 20 points, 11 assists, 13 rebounds. He had a nice game. And then Levine only with 18 points, but he had a stretch in the third quarter where he just said, fuck it, give me the ball. He took over. And then the only other guy in the Bulls I want to call out was Dosunmu, 16 points, 6 assists. Brooklyn had no one that could match his speed. So overall, really, really nice win for the Bulls, and nobody on the Nets had it going. I saw early on the ball was sticking in Schroeder's hands a lot, and I don't love it when the Nets play that way, when they don't have the ball movement. Like, yeah, Schroeder finished with 16 points, 10 assists, so statistically he had a nice game, but your offense isn't going to be great if every play in that first quarter is just him dribbling down the shot clock and putting up a prayer.
No, and to be honest with you, I look at this game as they had a great game, we had a bad game, but this is a Bulls team we could beat, similar records. I'd never found the Bulls good. I don't care how much like mid-level stars they have. So I'll take this loss with a grain of salt. Like, we just got outplayed in this one circumstance. Their bench guys are playing well, but look at the teams we beat this season, and we could easily come back with some healthier guys and catch the Bulls on an off night and beat them.
Yeah, I mean, if Cam Johnson or Cam Thomas plays, I think this is a completely different game. Like I said, you can only have that miracle win in Phoenix so many times, and we'll get to that. It just doesn't happen every night. I gotta call out Nick Claxton. Nick Claxton, he just hasn't been the same Clax we've seen in recent years. He just didn't look like he could match up with Vucevic in this one. He finished with 11 points, 8 rebounds. He was 5 of 10 from the field, but just hasn't really made an impact on the game in the way that we're accustomed to watching him play. Now, he has been dealing with a back issue. We know that obviously can limit his explosion, but he was a guy a few years ago. He can guard 1 through 5, and I don't see it now. So rough outing for him. Yeah. A few bright spots for the Nets. So this is their 3rd straight loss. It's good for the tank, right? For everyone who wants the Nets to lose as many games possible. Good for the tank. Day'Ron Sharpe did return. This was his first game of the season in limited action. He looked okay, but I think the Nets are very happy to have him back. I can see him, rounding to form. He looked like he was a step behind, but it wasn't because he's not good. It's just because it's his first game back of the season. And he said in the post game he played like ass, but I could see it's there. It's there for him. He's just got to get more runtime under his legs. And then also Dariq Whitehead. Shout out to Dariq. He led all Nets scorers with 18 points. He was 6 of 10 from 3-point land, and just nice to see him get it going. He has not been able to see the court as much as second-year guys like Jalen Wilson, like Noah Clowney. Spent a lot of time in the G League, but if he can get it going, Nick, he is a guy who can be a part of the future of this Brooklyn Nets team.
Yeah, good to see some young guys coming out and playing.
Sharpshooter from Duke, Dariq Whitehead. Okay.
Don't get me started on these Orlando Magic games.
Well, we're not. We're going to go back to the Suns win because this is one that – so Nick and I, we celebrated Thanksgiving together with our family. We were in Long Island, New York, and our Airbnb where we were staying on Wednesday night, it did not have the Yes channel, so I had to watch on the Gotham Sports app on my phone, and I watched this entire game. This was Jordi Fernandez's best win of the season. This was a Phoenix Suns team, Nick, playing at home with Kevin Durant, Bradley Beal, Devin Booker, all healthy. Tyus Jones, Yusuf Nurkic, they had their entire starting 5. They played 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. They played 7 guys off the bench, a few guys in garbage time, but no Cam Thomas for the Nets. Cam Johnson finished with 11 points. He was only 3 of 11 from the field, and the Nets beat the Suns on the road by 10 points. Unbelievable win. And we got to shout out our guy, Tyrese Martin. 30 points for Tyrese Martin. 10 of 13 from the field, 8 of 10 from 3.
He couldn't miss. He could not miss. You watch the players on the Suns, another shot go up, and they'd be like, are you fucking kidding me?
He totally had the Suns just – they had no idea who he was. After the game, they said, we did not see him on the scouting report. We had zero idea who he was. Wild to see him break out like that for Brooklyn. And it's gotten him a spot in the rotation. Since that game, he has played a good amount of minutes for Brooklyn. He hasn't had the same performance, but just a really, really nice story. A guy who has been on multiple teams in the NBA. He's 25 years old. I'm just trying to take a look at his career.
I mean, it was just so nice because we were watching that game. We couldn't miss in that fourth quarter. It was like once we got hot, we're talking about the Bulls being hot the other day. This is not a recurring theme for us where we're just like can't miss. This was a anomaly, but a really fun anomaly to watch. And what I love most about beating Kevin Durant is a shit talker. And you see him when he dunks over Dennis Schroeder, when he pushes Cam Johnson. Like I love Kevin Durant. He's one of the best of all time, but he talks shit. He thinks he's hot shit. He tries to talk shit. So watching him have nothing to say when a guy like Tyrese Martin or all these young guys are just drilling threes. Dennis Schroeder was hitting him from 4 feet beyond the arc. Watching Durant's face, because there was, I think, 1 or 2 where Durant did not put a hand up when Schroeder pulled up from top of the key, and he just watches it go in and is speechless. So watching Durant be stunned, a West contender to be in the top 3 to 5 teams in the West who thinks they have a shot to win a championship with this 3, Beal, Booker, and Durant, to be stunned by this Brooklyn Nets tanking team, beating them by 10 in Phoenix. That was so far, and it might be the remain that way, but so far is the highlight of the season.
To give you an idea of Tyrese Martin's journey, so he was drafted by the Hawks in 2022. He played 16 games. He averaged 1.3 points per game. Barely shot any threes. He averaged less than 5 minutes a game. And that was really it. He did not play in the 2023-24 season. Fast forward to now, he's averaging 7.2 points per game after that. He started 2 games since then. He's shooting around 52% from 3. I'm sure that's going to come down the more threes he makes. But just a really, really nice story in Therese Martin. And then you brought up Dennis Schroeder. Dennis Schroeder finished with 29 points. This is the kind of performance that you see from Dennis Schroeder, and you're like, if there's a team that's desperate for a point guard come playoff time or before the trade deadline, maybe we can get a first for Dennis Schroeder. I don't think so, but 29 points, 8 of 21 from the field, 9 of 9 from the line. And yeah, you mentioned some shots he had against KD. He hit that step back 3 and he just smiled in Kevin Durant's face. There's something about Dennis Schroeder that I love. Now, I do think that the ball has a tendency to stick in his hands in quarters 1 through 3. I'm okay with it in that fourth quarter. All right, there aren't a lot of guys on this Nets team I think that can go out and get a bucket when Cam Thomas isn't playing, like Dennis Schroeder can or like Cam Johnson can. Those are the only 2 guys I trust in the fourth quarter. Actually, the third guy I'd say is Trendon Watford, because he can go to the bucket and go to the hole and get a bucket. But really, really impressive performance from Schroeder.
I want to say two things about Schroeder. Is one, he would have been player of the game had Tyrese Martin not scored 3 more points than him and been like, the underdog story. Schroeder could have easily been the MVP of that game with the clutch shots he's hit. Second, I noticed this a lot with Schroeder's game in that game specifically, but a little bit during this whole season as well. When he is not shooting, he has a tendency to over create, like you're saying, the ball's in his hands for too long. And what he does is he always drives, catches himself in the air, and makes a bad pass and turns it over. I'm not saying always like he's getting 6, 7, 8 turnovers a game. That's not him. He makes a couple of mistakes here and there, but he always catches himself in the air trying to make something happen under the hoop and either getting blocked or getting it like knocked down by trying to make a bounce pass, like a kick out pass. So just an observation of Schroeder's game. With that said, against the Suns, he was great.
Trendon Watford chipped in 18 points off the bench. He's had some really nice moments this season as a net. And the thing I love about him, he just stays aggressive. Like whenever he gets on the court, whether they're winning, whether they're losing, he is not afraid to take it to the rim, get fouled, get blocked, get the and one layup. But just really, really impressed with those 3 guys in Martin, Schroeder, and Watford in this one. And then Ben Simmons, Nick, we got to bring him up. 14 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists. He started this game very hot for the Nets. I think he had he had 8 of the Nets' first points. Maybe he pushed off Kevin Durant and had a layup and stared Kevin Durant down.
That was cool. He big man Kevin, he big boy pushed him out of the way.
I know we've been hard on Ben Simmons during his tenure in Brooklyn, and I think it's justified. And I don't think that we're able to trade Ben Simmons for anything. And I think at the end of this year, he probably goes and tries out for a different team to see if he really has any basketball left. But it's instances like these, it's games like these where you look and you say, like, what could have been, right? If he could do that for 4 quarters consistently, if he can do that for a season, I would gladly take 14 points, 9 rebounds, 8 assists as his regular season stat line. It just has not been the case, Nick. This year, he's averaging 5.4 points per game, 5.8 rebounds per game, and 6.6 assists per game. For what he's getting paid, that's just not going to do it.
Those are honestly like my high school numbers. I was like a 6'6" and 6 guy. You know what I'm saying? And I was not Ben Simmons. I wish you ended with this game and not now had to go back to the 2 losses to Orlando, because now we're going to end on a darker note.
That's what we got to do. Final note on this game: the Nets outscored the Suns 33-21 in that third quarter, and the third quarter has not been kind to the Nets this year. So nice to see them make that adjustment against Phoenix. All right, so we return to Friday night after Thanksgiving. The Nets would take on Orlando on Friday night and then again on Sunday. So let's talk about the Friday night game first. They lose 123-100 against Orlando. Franz Wagner, Nick, has been playing like a fucking all-star this season. 29 points, 8 rebounds, 8 assists, a near triple-double for Franz. He was a plus 35 in this game. KCP, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, chipped in 19 points. He was 4 of 5 from 3, 7 of 8 from the field. And as much as the Nets dominated Phoenix in that third quarter on Wednesday, they got absolutely shellacked by Orlando in the third quarter, 35-22. They also lost the second quarter, 28-20. And the one thing about this game, Nick, it was a chippy game. Brooklyn tried to stay physical in this one. Ben Simmons got into it with Anthony Black and Jalen Suggs. There were 42 foul calls total called in this game by the refs. But overall, the Nets just did not have enough to stick with this Orlando team that has now beaten Brooklyn, I want to say 3 times this season, if not 4.
I mean, you're looking at what, a top 3 team in the East in the Orlando Magic? Cavs, Celtics, or are they third? I'm trying to get the standings up. But what do you expect? Yeah, Magic are third right now. Cavs 18-3, Celtics 17-4.
Magic have been hot the last, like, if you look at,
but again, I expect to lose these games, especially a team. I like the Magic. They're young, they're fun to watch. You got the Wagner brothers who at times are combining for 40 points a game. I don't expect to win these, but this one, when Shake Milton is your top scorer for the Brooklyn Nets, it's just like an ugly game that you from before the season started, you're like, yeah, this is a game I'm expecting to see this season. Yeah, I don't have much to say other than I like Franz Wagner a lot, and he's gonna be fantastic. And this Magic team is gonna be, for the next 5 to 7 years, a really fucking good team.
I want to shout out Shake Milton and Keon Johnson. Those guys, I'm sure both of them did not expect to get a ton of run this season. But when they've been in there, they haven't been terrible. Like you said, Shake Milton in this game, what was his stat line? Do you have it in front of you?
He had 22 points.
So 22 points in this one. But when he's been in there, he's been giving the Nets more than Ben Simmons can on the offensive side of the ball, especially with Cam Johnson being limited, due to health. And Ben Simmons just doesn't have a ton of guys that he can kick it to for threes. But Milton, Keon Johnson, they've been playing like 25 plus minutes a game these last few games with the injuries to Cam Thomas, Cam Johnson, and then Schroeder not playing every night. And Dorian Finney-Smith out as well. But I do want to shout out those two guys. Again, like we talk about players auditioning for their next role in the NBA. Keon Johnson is a guy who's been in the G League a lot. He is 22 years old, so he's looking for a permanent home in the NBA. And then Shake Milton, who I don't think is as old as he's 28 years old, so he's a guy who can still kind of have a second act in the NBA. A lot of people remember him from his days in Philadelphia, but just kudos to those two guys for when their number is called on. They've been aggressive and they've been able to score the ball.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, looking at this Magic game into the next one we're going to talk about, from a shooting standpoint, we actually did shoot 50% in this first game that we lost by 23, and then 38% in a game we lost by 8. So those young guys stepped up. We're actually hitting shots. We just got outplayed by a better team.
Okay, we move on to Sunday. Loss against Orlando, 192. The Nets just couldn't get offense going in this game. You had 29 points in the first, but then 21 in the second, 19 in the third, 23 in the fourth. You're not going to win a game in the NBA scoring 92 points unless your defense is stellar.
38% from the field. You have teams like the Magic who shoot 45 and 50% some nights because they're a top-tier skilled team with consistent shooters. We can't play, and listen, tanking aside, if our goal was to win, hypothetically in this conversation, we'll be shooting 38%, the next day 50, the next day 35, the next day 48. Like, you need consistency. And going from Shake Milton 22 to Shake Milton 6, not saying Shake Milton needs to be the guy that has to always step up, but you just see the discrepancy in box scores here. And it is night and day, both losses, but still some guys one night on, the next completely off. And I'm just, in the last 3 or 4 games on this losing spree, you are seeing just a lack of consistency from really anybody on the team.
The one thing I want to point out, I mean, both these games, this game more than the other game, it seemed like a practice session for the Magic. All 5 of their starters were in double figures. Goga Badatse, 12 points, 13 rebounds. It just seemed like the Magic have us figured out. I'm going to call it for what they ran the same play, Nick, where they drive through the middle of the lane. And it would either be Franz Wagner, it was Jalen Suggs, it was Caldwell Pope or Cole Anthony or Anthony Black, and they'd get to that middle of the lane. and our guy covering the rim, whether it was Claxton, whether it was Zaire Williams, they would step up and there would be a little lob thrown to Goga Badatse or Wendell Carter Jr., and they would slam it home. And it just kept happening. And every time the Nets would get closer, they'd run that play, and it just seemed like we had no answer. Cam Johnson led the way for the Nets with 26 points, 9 of 17 from the field. Dennis Schroeder had 20 points, off shooting day for him, 6 of 19, 1 of 6 from 3, 7 assists, 6 turnovers for Dennis Schroeder. And then again, Nick Claxton, I brought it up against Chicago, 9 points, 7 rebounds, 5 turnovers for Nick Claxton. It's a lot of turnovers for your starting center. So overall,
Goga Batidze.
Sure.
He's a Georgian center. He's 6'11", 25 years old. He's only averaging like 5 points a game. The country of Georgia, I just looked it up. It's stunning. It's like green hills and valleys and these like old, almost like Spanish style rooftops. Like it just looks like a beautiful place to visit. So side note, we should go to Georgia at some point.
Thanks for that. Yeah, no, well, absolutely. I'll put it on the calendar in 2025 for us to take a trip to Georgia together.
Cool.
Thanks for that contribution to the game analysis.
Well, I want to say it's the country of Georgia. You know that, not the state of Georgia.
Yeah, but some people call countries states.
What?
Yeah, some people be like the state of this, but they really mean the country.
Or all right, continue with your analysis.
No, not much else to say. Orlando has this figured out, and then we already talked about the Chicago game, but for some reason, Jordi Fernandez has the West figured out. Whenever we play the West, we compete. Denver, we took to OT. We're undefeated against the West outside of that game. The East has been a struggle. The only teams that we have beaten in the East, and I just wanted to take a quick look, it has been Milwaukee we beat, Chicago we beat, Charlotte we beat. That's 4. That's it. So 4 out of the 9 wins have been against the East. The other 6 that would be, I guess, 5 wins, right? Because we're 9 and 13.
Yeah.
2.
You're really bad at math.
4, 5, 6. No, we have 6 wins. Do we have it? Hold on. How am I getting this wrong? 1, 2, 3. Oh no, we only have 3 wins against the East. I'm sorry, 3 wins against the East. So we're 3 wins against the East, 6 wins against the West for 9 wins in total. Yeah, listen. Losing isn't the worst thing if you're the Nets, but you do want to see them compete. And they competed against Orlando at times. They didn't really compete against Chicago. You want to see them just put up a fight against these teams in the East. I think we will moving forward. Our next game is Wednesday night against Indiana, and then we have a little bit of a break, and then we play Milwaukee, who's been figuring it out the last few games. We play them on Sunday at 3:30, and then we don't play again until Thursday against Toronto, December 19th. So over the next, what's December 19th minus 3? So over the next 16 days, we play 3 games, Nick. Hopefully we figure it out, we compete, but otherwise look to see the Nets start to dip their toes in the trade pool and see what's out there. Real fast, just want to shout out Ian Cart. He wrote, "What about Derek?" Ian, we mentioned Derek's performance against Chicago in the beginning of the podcast. Really nice to see him put up 18 points, 6 of 10 from 3. He's a pure shooter, and there's always a role for a guy who can shoot the lights out of the gym. So I'm excited to see what else Derek Whitehead can do. It's funny to me, Nick, and tell me if you think I'm right here. If you put Derek Whitehead and Jalen Wilson together, you'd get the perfect basketball player. Because the only thing that kind of holds Jalen Wilson back from being great is he's a streaky shooter. But he does everything else. He can drive to the rim. He has a nice float game. He can hit the mid-range shot. Whereas Derek Whitehead, all he really does is kind of pull from 3.
Yeah, that's fair. Maybe we put them in a lab and swirl them up.
And put Noah Clowney, combine him with those 2 guys. I mean, you have the perfect NBA player.
Yep, for sure.
Anyways, all right, summary of the episode. Me and Nick are going to travel to Georgia next year. Shout out to everyone for listening. Shout out to our audience. Shout out to the Brooklyn Nets. And guys, we have the culture, we have the coach. We just need the players. Nick, any final words for the listeners before we wrap up?
Get bent.
Say something nicer to the listeners, please.
I hope everyone had a nice Thanksgiving.
Oh, that's very nice. All right. This was episode 207 of Spenny and the Nets. I'm Spen Harris. He's my co-host, Nick. Tune in next week.